Welcome to Soul Nutrition, where we discuss the various ways of nourishing our souls. I'm your host, author, speaker, and coach, Reina Rose. Today's guest is Kimberly Klacik. Kimberly grew up in Accokeek, Maryland, once known as the home of the Beretta gun manufacturer. In 2010, she became engaged to her now husband and moved to Baltimore, where she very quickly started making a positive impact on the community. In 2013, Kimberly founded Potential Me to assist underserved women in workforce development. Assisting close to 200 women to become gainfully employed, 30% went on to obtain financial independence. As the nonprofit grew, she employed women re-entering society and quickly found out what it took to manage payroll and support families to thrive with the opportunities she helped create. Kimberly, it is such an honor to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So tell us, how did you gain such a passion for, helping the community thrive wherever you are?
Yeah, so, when I moved in 2010 to Baltimore area, I thought, wow, it was like night and day. Growing up in Accokeek, right outside of DC, it's a DC suburb. You get to Baltimore and it's only 40 minutes away, but it's huge. It's like huge as far as, where they are in not just their economy, but where the people are just in life. It's interesting to see that so many people are just that far away from the DC capital area that are, living and dealing with so much poverty, that's dealing with so much as far as, poor education, or kids aren't being exposed to much, and so I said, somebody's got to get up here and do something. This is unacceptable. And so I try to take it on the best way I could.
Yeah, and I know that as soon as you moved there, you moved from Accokeek and you got there and there was just trash all over the streets. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's a big difference too. It's like just the way the city is run is a big difference. And it was almost as if there was a tale of two Baltimores going on, because it's like one part of Baltimore, pristine, it's amazing, Harbor East, Federal Hill area. You go to, maybe 10 minutes or 10 blocks away, and you're in like an entirely different country, which I think Senator Bernie Sanders called out in 2015, saying it looked like a third world country. It's very harsh to say something like that, but that is exactly what many neighborhoods on the west side of Baltimore look like, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the saying that when the water rises, so do all the boats. Cleaning up that area and helping people to thrive there helps the beautiful half of the city thrive too, because when everyone's thriving and everybody is able to have cleaner streets. I know that you went in and actually helped, you videoed a lot of the trash on the streets to let the city know what was going on, right? Because I'm sure there's some people who sit up in the clean side of the city, never go over there, and so think everything's okay and fine. And so you made sure that the use of social media and being able to use your platform, you made sure that people knew what was going on. So that's part of like how you fight for people, right?
Absolutely. So I got, beat up for it, but you explain it, correctly. There are a lot of people in these very nice neighborhoods that never venture to the not so nice neighborhoods because they don't have to. They have all of their resources right there near home. So a lot of people didn't understand, the videos that I was uploading on social media showing all the blight, showing, 17,000 vacant homes in one area, showing, the trash and just the illegal dumping. People didn't understand that it really looked that bad. A lot of people were like, oh, she's just doing it for the cameras. She kind of made it look that way, out of video technology, I guess. And I'm like, no, it actually looks worse than what you see. And so I always say to people, I'm like, if it didn't look so bad, why didn't, those local media cameras, left-wing media, even CNN or anyone else, they could have came to West Baltimore and showed people, Kim Klacik is lying. This is fake news. It's great over here. But they never showed up to do that. And so, when I was there taking the video, I, was showing the trash, but I was also interviewing people that lived there. And they were just telling me how bad it's been for so long. And then it went into, have you talked to your congressman? Have you talked to local leaders? And they tell me, they're nowhere to be found ever. So I know I got a lot of backlash on it. People kind of said, who is this girl? She just showed up in Baltimore and all of a sudden she's talking about the living conditions. But I do believe everyone should have the same quality of life all over.
Definitely. And again, when we help to regentrify areas that have tons of vacancies and trash everywhere, the whole city, the value rises because, if you just drive across the street and there's vacant homes that are boarded up and there's trash everywhere, that's going to make your own home value go down. I know I used to live in Houston, Texas for a while, and the area that I ended up living in actually had recently been regentrified, but you could go and there were still pockets that hadn't. But because people were going in there and cleaning up those houses and making them nice and investing in that community, all the communities around it their values were rising too. And so that's something I think that people don't realize when you're saying, hey, we need to invest over here too, that it will actually help even over here continue to rise in value even more, because it's not like you drive across the street and you have to worry about this, trash being everywhere. And when someone's coming to view your home maybe, or your business, that they're not driving through something like that. And then of course, it helps the people in those communities to actually have a decent quality of life where they can thrive. And I love that you're educating them to call the congressman and to make sure they reach out, because a lot of times, let's be honest, we don't even know how many of us watching this show, be honest out there, have ever called your congressman or, we talk about politics a lot sometimes, we complain about them, but to actually go out there and make a difference. And I love that that's what you did. You got to Baltimore and you said, you know what, I've got to make a difference here. And so I'm going to run for Congress and make sure that this whole community thrives.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Talking to people, I definitely said, you realize you don't have to live like this, right? You realize that this is not the norm. But, I guess just like, some people don't leave their nicer neighborhoods. A lot of people in this area, don't have transportation and they don't leave their neighborhoods. So a lot of people were kind of like, this is life for us. This is what we know. And so, yeah, I always tell people, get out there and contact your representative, because obviously there are resources going into other parts of the city and not here. And that's just not right.
Right. And as you said, it benefits everybody to make sure that everything is good. And speaking of that, I know that you're pro-business. And so as a business owner myself, I know that, if I have a big business building, again, I want people to drive through the city to have it all be nice. If they're in the suburbs, those are nice too. That if they want to come work for my business, they know that they can live in a greater part of the radius around my business and come work for me. So I love, again, that you're not just one side or the other. You're not just only the nice side of town, pro businesses, schools, you want everybody to thrive, and really the one helps the other. And so tell me a little bit more about your platform of pro business.
Yeah, so this is the only part really that I've been talking back and forth with the Trump administration about. Not too long ago, there were some maps drawn, especially in the local area in Baltimore, with the opportunity zone maps. But because of the local leaders and the way they drew the maps, there are lots of portions of West Baltimore that was left out of it. And so, there are a lot of areas where you don't find, they call it a food desert, which is crazy to me. I never heard of that until I got to Baltimore. But they don't have a grocery store. Yeah, they don't have a grocery store.
For those who don't know, that there's no grocery stores around, right? You'd have like little convenience stores where you can get noodles or something, but you can't get fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, the things that we completely take for granted in our big grocery stores, that you have areas of town that don't have a grocery store, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. And so they're kind of grocery shopping at like a corner liquor store or a mini mart. And so, I never knew that even existed, right? So I get out there and I'm talking to community leaders, and there's a gentleman by the name of Doc Cheatham. He actually grew up with Congressman Cummings and my opponent, Kwesi Appiah. And he said, he was knocking on their doors while they were in office saying, look, we deserve to have a grocery store. We deserve to have some businesses come set up shop here so these kids can have a job as they're finishing high school, as they're going through college, and then afterwards. And so, he felt like he was knocking on deaf ears. He said, no one ever came out to talk about it. He said he was upset. We had the riots in 2015 after the death of Freddie Gray. And then millions of dollars was actually sent to that specific area through President Obama, through Congressman Cummings. And for some reason, here we are in 2020, and that money still hasn't made it to the ground. So, going back and forth with the Trump administration, I'm talking to them and saying, look, the money came, the money is somewhere. We just don't know which contractors received it or where it went at all. And so they said, okay, we can deal with that part of it as far as accountability and transparency, but we also have to deal with, enlarging the map as far as the opportunity zones to get businesses in there and give them some incentive to be there. But, of course, we also have the crime and violence portion of it. And we are doing, even bigger numbers this year than we did last year. Last year, we had a record number of homicides, 348.
Wow.
So we actually beat out New Orleans in 2019 for the highest murder capita in the entire country. So, we have a tough time. We have less than 600,000 people in the Baltimore City area. To have that many murders, we have so many shootings, so many carjackings. It's unbelievable. And now we have a lot of juveniles that are wrapped in it, and they're, constantly going in and out of our juvenile justice system. So there's a lot going on. The education system, it's all connected, it's complicated, but it's all connected. And I think if we get a handle on some of these things, we can definitely make a big impact, I would think, in the next 5 to 6 years.
Absolutely. And of course, if you're unable to get a job, and you're unable to get a decent education because you can't go to the school that's good, and I know that you're pro school choice as well, and what's there to turn to? There's no job, there's no education, your whole community is full of trash. What's there to turn to but crime? I mean, and that's not an excuse, of course, but we need to look at the realistic factors that if we don't have a place for people to be employed, we don't have places for them to get a good education, what more do we expect them to do but turn to crime? I mean, it's just a logical step.
Right. Absolutely. And you have to, consider, the drug dealers, the gang members, they're the ones driving the nice cars, and they've got all the jewelry and, the pretty girlfriends. And so, kids get out of school and they're like, wow, that's what I idolize. I want to be, the drug dealer in the area. I want this turf because I can make as much money as this guy. And so, if that's their role models, that's the inspiration here. I mean, it's tough, but, I think we can make a difference. I think there's enough people that want to see the kids in Baltimore thrive. We just all have to get on the same page. We always go back and forth with that. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat. We just got to get and sit down at the table and say, look, it's about the kids at this point. What are we going to do to make sure everyone has a future?
And again, it's about the kids and their future. And for those of us who aren't kids, that affects our future. If you have a bunch of kids, seeing drug dealers and gangbangers as the only people who thrive in their community, it's only going to increase your drug dealers and gangbangers. And so, when mom's at home struggling, crying because she can't pay the rent, and the drug dealer is driving the nicest car in town and, seems to have everything, what choice are people usually going to make? And so it's so important I love that you're really advocating for education. You're really advocating for businesses to come in, give these kids jobs, help them to have an alternative to thriving other than drugs and crime. And so tell us a little bit more about, for those who, I just honestly studied school choice recently. And so for those who don't know the issue yet, please let us know, what is school choice and why does it matter?
Yeah, so in an ideal world, we want every school to be perfect and giving the best education possible. That's the ideal world. But until we get to that point, there are a lot of students that go to school based on their zip code, right? And so say your mom is, trying to make things ends meet. She's a single mom. She's doing the best she can. You're in a neighborhood where she's close to work because she has to take public transportation. But the school in that area, unfortunately, just isn't up to par. And we've got a lot of schools in Baltimore City area where kids are not learning to read, write, or do basic math. They're not graduating, and almost none are going off to college. And so, with school choice, that mom could say, look, you know, there's a charter school, you know, maybe 4 zip codes over, but, you know, the students can take the city buses or transportation. And I would like my son or daughter to get a better education in that area, and not have to worry about, you know, or myself having to worry about where my kid is after school. You know, are they receiving a good education? You know, are they walking out of school and into a dangerous situation? I tell people all the time, if you want to just go and just sit in a parking lot after school gets out in certain areas and just watch, you know, what goes on outside that school. You know, there's a lot of, they call them corner boys, you know, that are out there basically dealing drugs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're from either 12 years old to 19 years old. And if your kid's walking through that situation, we've had kids that have talked about they've been recruited into gangs as they're walking out of school, you know. So there's a lot going on. And until we get a handle on that situation, I think school choice is ideal, because some people can't help which zip code they live in. They just can't. And so, you know, we got to be able to give them an opportunity to thrive as well.
Definitely. I think it's so important to have that choice. And of course, the more that people are having to leave school, like leave their zip code, hopefully the schools start cleaning up. I mean, and again, when you start bringing jobs in to give some people an alternative to dealing drugs, and you have those businesses coming into those communities, even, you know, a grocery store, I mean, your nutrition is so important, and being able to have kids be clerks at grocery stores and their families too. Because again, you know, you see mom unable to pay the rent and drug deal doing awesome. That's a hard choice not to make sometimes for a lot of people. You know, America is founded on opportunity, right? And good opportunity or bad opportunity, people want opportunity. And so by providing a school choice, you provide opportunity somewhere outside of crime that is in that particular community. Because like you said, not everybody can decide where they live. You know, especially if that income has been small because there are no jobs and you can't get out of that situation. At least if you can go get that education. I saw Alexander Hamilton while I was out in, you know, the play, and that's what he does. He leaves to go get an education because he can't do that where he is. And so, and then of course he becomes one of our, you know, founders of the country. And so kids need that opportunity to be able to leave their current environment and get an education. But I love, again, Kimberly, the way that you are so inclusive of both sides of the coin. You know, you want to clean up these streets, but also give people an opportunity to get out of them, you know, and come back and better their community. Because if they go out, get that education, they come back and they better that community. If a grocery store comes in and mom can go work for a grocery store, you know, and so can I, better jobs are more opportunities gonna happen. And it's easier to say no to those deals that you didn't want to say yes to in the first place, that it might have been the only thing. And so I just really love your holistic approach to bettering the community.
Thank you. Yeah, and it also makes those schools more competitive, like you said earlier. I mean, you know, once they don't have the number of students there, they've got to get more competitive. They've got to up the curriculum. They have to do better with their test scores. So it's a win-win all around, in my opinion, and it seems to work best. You know, the charter schools in the Baltimore City area are our best performing schools. And, you know, I don't think that's a coincidence. You know, they know that they have to compete and, you know, to be able to keep that charter school going. So I think we obviously have to look at different alternatives as far as education, because these kids, I mean, they're coming out without even any trade, any skills, any education. And where else do you expect them but on the streets? I don't fault the kids in this situation. I just don't.
Right, and you get that cyclical, you know, pattern happening over and over because there's no education, there's no money, there's no opportunity to work. What do you do, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, I really love that it's like, let's put pressure on the schools to have to do better because their kids are going to start going elsewhere. Let's give these kids who really want to the opportunity to go elsewhere, come back into their community. Let's bring in the grocery stores so that they have somewhere to work, somewhere to actually get fresh food. I mean, for those of us, I know that I'm one of those people who says, only shop on the outsides of the grocery store where you're going to get, fresh produce and meats and these kind of things. People literally can't do that. You can only go to a corner store and get a cup of noodles, and you're not even nourishing your body. How is your brain going to function? And so we talk about soul nourishment on this show. I mean, you need to nourish your body. You need to nourish your soul. And again, if you're in this, let's say, soul-sucking environment where every street corner you turn, you're having to walk past a drug dealer. Maybe you're going to get beat up if you don't get recruited into their system. And you have an opportunity to take a bus and get out of there, and you don't have to walk by that every day. I mean, just to have that opportunity is a lifesaver in so many cases. And so we talked a little bit about transparency, and I know that transparency and accountability are huge parts of your platform. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those mean to you?
Yeah, so it basically comes down to money. Unfortunately, there is a lot of money, not just federal funds, but from the state of Maryland that have gone into Maryland's District 7, more specifically into Baltimore City. And no one seems to know where this money is, not just the millions of dollars that was spent to the Penn North Corridor through Elijah Cummings after the riots, but there's been other things that came in, like they call it the youth fund. There was this fund that came in, $25 million that was supposed to go to organizations that support the youth, basically with summer programs or whatever programs they had. They now say only half that money exists. They don't know where the other half is, but this happens a lot. Baltimore City gives lots of money, to the tune of millions of dollars to nonprofits every single year. But it never seems to make anything better. The kids aren't being educated. There's still people out of work. No more career opportunities are coming in. You've got people going through these job training programs, and these programs are then supposed to place people in jobs, but they don't actually do that part of it. They go through job training, and then people are like, oh, sorry, we don't have a job to place you in. Thank you for coming through our program, because that's how they show the numbers and the data to get more money from the state or from federal funds, by showing they had this many people in class. But unfortunately, the people that go through that class never end up with a career. So there's a lot of due diligence that isn't being done. It's like you could run an audit on all of these things, but you would need somebody to then take that audit and say, okay, I'm going to go make sure this happened, this is in place, this is where it should be, and that's what I plan to do. You can't just run an audit and be like, well, they say the money's here, because that might just be, of course, anything can happen in writing. So there's a lot going on where we just got to figure out where this money is going and why it never seems to pop up where it's supposed to be. I know a lot of people talk about that, it's kind of like a slush fund with these nonprofits. And you can see CEOs of these nonprofits are getting paid, six-figure salaries. And then they say, okay, well, we put this much back into the community.
Nonprofit.
Yeah. So it's, but that's how, I feel like that's how Baltimore City kind of operates. It's like, you've got all these CEOs, even our Baltimore City school system CEO, Sonia Santalis, she gets paid $325,000 a year. You've got a ton of schools that aren't even functioning, as far as getting kids out of school and educated, yet she's getting paid that much money, and she just recently got a raise, believe it or not. So there's a lot of people up top making a lot of money, but unfortunately, they're not either doing what they say they're supposed to be doing, or, other people that are supposed to be making money on the lower end just aren't making enough to make ends meet. And so, we've got to figure it out. It's a mess.
Definitely. And I'm all for people, making a great salary. I think that, if you've worked hard and you make it to the top, the worker should earn his wages. However, we need to be producing results for those wages. And if time and time again, money seems to be slipping through the cracks of our organization, it's time to get someone else to handle that money that isn't being accounted for. And like you said, you're chasing after the millions that were supposed to be donated over here and be donated over there. And where are they? And I love that, you're really going after that transparency and accountability, that if you got this money, you need to show me where it is and where it's going and what it's actually doing. Because if it's not doing something, it needs to go somewhere else, not to you. because
Right.
if you're, if someone else, and that's what America's founded on, is that if I can do it better, cheaper, faster, then I'm going to get the business. and if you are, not making the cut, you're not going to get the business. And so I love that that's what you're really going after is I want to see your books. I want to see what your results. I want to see where it's going. And if it's not, we've got to figure something else out.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I don't know if you saw our former Mayor Pugh was indicted. She just got sent to prison not too long ago because of pay for play and because she was helping out friends with contracts.
Right.
And so that's who's really getting this money. It's either you pay for it or you are a friend or a family member or something like that, not because, you're getting the results in the community. And so we need to change that whole, mindset of, oh, well, I can be here because I know so-and-so. It's like, come on, man. This is why Baltimore City never gets anywhere. It's like you can't get past that part of it. And that's the corrupt part of it is, local officials helping each other and their family out. And I'm fine. If your cousin ran a nonprofit and did a great job, well, great. I'm glad your cousin's there. But if your cousin isn't even showing up, I mean, come on, it's got to change.
And that's where I think one of the things that's been on my heart lately, and I just read a book called Changing the World Through Prayer and Fasting. And actually, one of the main things it talks about is praying for our government, praying for our leaders, that they are transparent, that they are accountable, that they are doing the things that God would call us to do. And so it's now that you're talking about, all this corruption that goes on, and so many of us, we know, okay, corruption happens, people don't do what they're supposed to. We know this, but to hear the stories, and that's what I love, this is what you do. You come in and you use your platform to show people like, this is what's happening in real life, in real words, rather than just, here's the topic and this is what I stand for. And, this message is supported by me. You really go in there and real life hands-on saying, here's what's happening and here's what needs to happen. And here's the steps to get there. And so I really love the way that you approach politics because it's not the typical politician that is just going out there to smile and kiss babies, right? You're really going out there with a heart to change communities for the better and change your community for the better.
Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah. Working with my nonprofit, as you mentioned earlier, Potential Me for 8 years, I saw exactly what was affecting these communities, so I had this view on the other side of things. I didn't come through politics. I came from, someone that actually wanted to help in the community. I then noticed what the red tape was, why we were getting blocked, where the obstacles were. And then I said, you know what, we can change this by just changing who's in office. And so, some people that are in these neighborhoods, they're like, yeah, Kim, go get it. We're excited, but they never actually, talk about that in the local media. Now it's all kind of like, well, who do you think you are running against Kwesi and Fume? He's the former head of the NAACP. You're just some girl. And I'm like, well, no, I mean, to you, I might be just some girl, but I've been in the community for 8 years trying to help people get past the policies that like my opponent put in place many years ago. And so I'm just, trying to help out. I know people in the community get it. I'm just hoping that it translates, across to everyone.
Yeah. And so how do you translate that? I know sometimes in those communities that have been impoverished for a long time, voting isn't something that is one of those things that gets passed down. Voting often happens in those sectors with all the money because they know that voting gets the money. How do we encourage people who historically haven't tended to get out there and vote? They want to talk about the issues and it's affecting their lives more than most of the people who do get out and vote. How do we encourage people to, and I mean, it's hard sometimes even take the time off work. I mean, to maybe get that mail-in ballot so that you don't need to take the time off work, send it in advance. How do we really push the needle forward on getting people who really need to vote to start voting?
Yeah, so my field director is actually, he's in West Baltimore today, basically trying to talk to people about voter registration. So we're going to be working with a group that is, that's what they handle. And then we're going to help them kind of set up shop right there, right at the Penn North corridor. I don't know if you saw in 2015 where the riots were, where that CVS was burned down.
Wow.
That CVS has actually been really nice to us. So they're like, yeah, if you want to sign wave here, if you want to talk to people about your message, we were struck in 2015. We know exactly what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say. So we're going to set up a table out there, have this group, come out and get people registered to vote and just talk to people one-on-one about the importance of voting. It's like some people, I don't think they realize how important it is. And, when you look at the news or you read the newspaper and you see all the stuff like, President Trump did this or President Obama did this. And so some people in their mind, they automatically believe it's one of the presidents that's making their lives difficult. It's like, it's really local leadership that's making your life difficult that you could change that by voting. I said, but for some people, they get misled with all these headlines in the media, and it's like, no, if you just vote in your local election cycles, you could see some differences by the people that you vote for. Right now, we have an incoming mayor who's for defunding the police, and I stated this, he says he's doing it because, police are spending too much money and they need an audit. And I said, well, why don't we start there? Why not audit the police? Why are we defunding the police? Let's do an audit. I'm all for figuring out why the Baltimore City Police Department spends so much money. I'm all for that. I'm a conservative. I'm right there with you. But when you use words like defund the police in an area where, homicides are already sky high, how do I then talk businesses to come and set up shop in an area where there might not be many police officers and there's homicides on each corner every week, So, that will make it difficult even to bring any incentives to businesses to come into the area. So, we're trying to work, I guess, against a high tide here. It's like not just the words that are being used, but even the actions. In Baltimore, they're not very pro-business. Just over the weekend, our incoming mayor was talking about restaurants changing their dress code so it doesn't seem racist to say things like you can't have athletic wear, where the restaurants are like, well, we're a private business and we want it to be an upscale, nice restaurant. We want our patrons to come in looking nice. And
I think it's racist to say that athletic wear is for a particular race or not.
Yes,
that is
I thought, yeah, I was like, wait a minute, I love to dress up and go out to eat. Like, I mean, are you kidding me? So yeah, but that's what the incoming mayor says, but he's more about socialism. He's more into that. He's actually a lot younger. He is a lot younger. They voted for someone younger this time around, but he's more into just, I guess, the casual atmosphere at restaurants, no matter what the price on the menu is. And, and I'm just kind of like, look, you can't tell a private business how to run their business. We already have very few businesses that want to stay in Baltimore. So, it's tough. We're running against the tide here, but
it's hard to charge, several $100s a person on a meal when people show up in athletic wear.
Yes.
Even if you come dressed nice and there's somebody over there like wearing tennis shoes and sweats.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep charging that value per plate because the whole ambiance of the restaurant, any business, you have a brand to uphold. And so I think it's actually more racist to say that athletic wear belongs to a certain race or another. That's more racist to me than having a dress code.
No, absolutely. I agree. And when I want to go somewhere really nice and it's a very special occasion, something maybe somewhere we can't afford the prices, every day of the week, say we go once a year for our anniversary, I want to go dressed up and I want it to be beautiful and nice. And, I want everyone around us to kind of, have that same vibe. And so I don't know. It's crazy that this is where we're going with things, but
and let's be honest. Like even the most impoverished people in America, maybe not everywhere, but most in America have their Sunday best and could go to a restaurant in their Sunday best And again, if they're going somewhere that they're going to be paying that much per plate, they at least have an outfit to where that's not, that's just funny. Not even funny. That's sad that that would be considered racist to have a dress code. So I agree with you. Like, let businesses be businesses. Let them have their brand. Of course, if it's like someone of a certain race can't come in here, yes, that cannot happen. But having a expected dress code, that's like, you know, saying at some point someone couldn't say no shoes, no shirt, no service. Like, or now I'm in Los Angeles, we have mask orders for most businesses that you have to go into because, you know, we've been second to New York, the epicenter here, and we have our deaths rising all the time, or they're rising again because everything opened up. But we want things to open up, so keep your mask on and just, you know, for now, that's what we need to do. You know, I think we need to let businesses be businesses. If they say masks, have masks. If they say wear a dinner jacket and, you know, nice outfit, we need to do that. So going into the pro-Trump, tell us, I mean, some people would say, what do you mean? You're a woman, you're African-American, how can you be pro-Trump? But I actually have been doing a little bit more research. And again, coming from California, we don't want to believe anything good about Trump, right? But there are a lot of things actually that as I research more that I'm not seeing the racism that is portrayed or the misogynism that tends to be portrayed. Tell us about being pro-Trump as a woman, as an African-American, that maybe some people don't understand out there.
Yeah, so, you know, when he first kind of stepped on the scene as he was running for president, to me, he just kind of spoke the language of the general population, you know, very much so. And then maybe this is just my view. And I could say I've been getting attacked for have not finishing college, but you know, very much so. We always see as like the elitist, you know, those that are running for office are either the lawyers, you know, it's somebody that has gone through law school and now they're, you know, in this and they're on this board or they're doing this. And so it's kind of like there's always been like this elite kind of snobbish attitude, I felt like, in politics. And maybe that's just my take. And not to say that he's not elite or snobbish, right? Because he's part of, as far as we know, he's a billionaire. You know, we haven't seen the taxes yet, but he says he is one. And so, you know, he is part of that group, but I think he's kind of more no nonsense, which I feel like I am at times. You know, it's like, I know everyone talks about being politically correct and, you know, making sure we don't hurt people's feelings when we say certain things. And it's kind of like, for me, if it's the truth, it's the truth. You know, sometimes the truth hurts, sometimes it doesn't feel good, you know, but if it needs to be said, it needs to be said. But then also after that, you know, I voted for President Obama in 2008. I did. I was so excited to see a Black man become the president of the United States. And I thought, you know, finally, we're going to have someone that's going to talk about the importance of family structure, which he is, by all appearances, a great husband, a great father. Talk about, you know, the way that he grew up and how he was able to come from not a whole lot and make a whole lot of his life, you know, get, you know, a great education and become the president of the United States. I thought, wow, we are finally going to hear that story. You know, this is the American dream. But that story never came out, you know, it never happened. And it almost seemed like we were going backwards in a way. You know, this is when Michael Brown happened. And I guess that was was it Michigan with the Michael Brown case? Or we also had, you know, just things where, you know, Trayvon Martin, that was a tough case. I honestly didn't know why George Zimmerman got off there, but that was a tough case. But there were so many things where we were so focused on race. And I thought, this is the time to focus on just how many Black families are doing well in America, how we are able to overcome, how we were able to just keep going and not listen to, you know, the media or anything else that was telling us that we were oppressed or having a hard time. Because look at President Obama, you know, look what had happened here. But that never happened. And I was actually really disappointed in that. And it seemed to me when he was running in 2008, it seemed like he was going to talk more about that. And for some reason, it didn't happen. So for me, President Trump kind of came in and knocked down that whole political correctness. You know, he tweets a lot. I know there's a lot of people, Republicans also, that do not love his tweets. But I think in his mind, the way I look at it is kind of how I look at the rest of the system. It's the only way to be very transparent, you know, because when the video surfaced of me going through West Baltimore, and I was telling people, local officials, about it for over a week before President Trump saw them and started retweeting them. But unfortunately, you know, CNN and other outlets, they said, wow, look what this young lady said to President Trump so he could attack Baltimore. And I was like, wait a minute, that is not even what happened.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, unless you tweet, unless you actually say what's going on your own social media, no matter what party you belong to, you know, the words have to come from you nowadays, or so many things can get spun into like a fake story. And so
Absolutely.
I kind of understand why he chooses to, you know, tweet or do, you know, make his own post, because otherwise it can get that spin on it and end up being a, you know, false story or out of context. So I get that part of it. But then even further, you know, like I said, I was working with Trump administration with opportunity zones. It's another reason why I'm pro-Trump. You know, this is an administration where they kind of reached out and said, hey, what can we do to make Baltimore better?
Wow.
You know, I took some Baltimore leaders down to the White House. They were there in January. They met with Jerron Smith and a couple people from Jared Kushner's office. They told them exactly what they need to have happen in West Baltimore to make it better. And this is, as far as those community members know, this is the first time any administration or anyone reached out to them and said, how can we help? So that's another reason why I'm pro-Trump, because he's actually got people on his teams, you know, checking things out and saying, hey, I think we can help here by doing that. And they actually reach out and talk to people. So I know for some it's kind
more
of
important than looking good and,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I know some people are like, you know, especially in Baltimore, they're like, how can you be pro-Trump? Oh my goodness. And then I explained to them, you know, the conversations that we're having with the administration and how they want to help. And then they say, okay, well, I could see that part. But, you know, of course, they're like, I'll believe it when I see it. And I say, okay, I understand that. I get it.
Well, and again, you're showing the accountability and the true, here's where they're actually helping. Here's what is happening. Here's what it looks like. Here's what's being tweeted. Here's what the media that goes latches onto. But here's what's happening. And I love, again, Kimberly, I love your outlook on life and on politics, because what I'm seeing is, you know, here's a problem here. I'm going to bring it into the light and see what's wrong and how we can fix it. And even like you're saying with the Black families and their stories of success, and of course it's not neglecting that there is oppression and there is, you know, people need to be woke and realize that there's cyclical poverty and things that need to be addressed. But it's saying, rather than focus on what's going wrong, let's focus on the few that got it right and try to model them. And if somebody in America has been able to do this, that means everyone potentially in America could do this. So let's focus on the stories who got it right. I mean, we don't focus on all the businesses that failed in order to run our business. We look at the people who have been successful. We read their books. We study their models. And so I love that that's the approach you want to come through. All right, where has it been successful? How can we repeat that? Let's not try to reinvent the wheel here. Let's see where it's been successful and let's model that. And let's see where we haven't been successful in this line of paperwork and we can find it, and we're going to bring it into the light so that from now on we can be completely transparent with where all our money's going, the outcomes of the programs, because maybe the money's going where it's supposed to go, but if it's not doing anything, let's put it somewhere else. And so I just love this transparency, and you've started that from the very beginning when you just went out and showed this is what's happening and we need to do something about it. And you're still doing that now, and you're saying, here's what's happening, here's what works, here's what didn't. Now we need to model more of what works and stop throwing away money into what's not. So
thank you.
Yeah, I love your mentality. I love your spirit around this. Tell us, okay, I want to get into a few more of the issues. We've got about 15, 20 minutes left. So you are anti-squad. Tell us, for those who don't even know what the squad is, tell them what the squad is, because I was having to research a little bit more about it today, this week too. So tell us about the squad, tell us about their issues and why that's not something you're on board with, and why people think maybe should have been.
Yeah. So the squad has actually been very quiet lately now that they've had a meeting with Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I hear she runs the House, so I think she did something. But the squad is actually made up of Rashida Tlaib out of Detroit, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in Brooklyn, New York. And then you've got Ilhan Omar, she's in Michigan. And then you have, or no, she's in Minneapolis, excuse me. And then you have, who was it? Ayanna Pressley. Now, Ayanna Pressley, believe it or not, I actually agree with her on many issues. Okay. And one of them was the fact that she worked with Justin Amash recently, Representative Amash, with trying to do some kind of police reform bill. And they talked about, and Justin Amash is a Republican, by the way, she's a Democrat. They talked about rolling back the qualified immunity the Supreme Court gave the police department in 1982. Yeah. And basically what that does is kind of, so you know about that. Yeah. So I believe
tell us about it. Because again, okay. I want people to be able to watch this, whether they're into politics or not, and really understand the issues. Because that's something that you are so good at, is you help people understand issues that they didn't understand before.
Thank you. Yeah. So qualified immunity basically gave the police the right to use excessive force, even if it was going against someone's constitutional rights. Wow. And so, you know, when you see things like the George Floyd tragedy, I call it a tragedy, and he's, you know, the cop has his knee on George Floyd's neck, even as he's handcuffed on the ground. Yeah. You know, that should have never happened. You know, that's using aggressive force. But, you know, as a police officer, and this is a guy that's been there, he was a veteran for, I believe, 20 years on the force. Yeah. You know, as a police officer, he knew that he could use that kind of force. And
he had gotten out of it so many times already.
Exactly, because of the training and then also the policies that are in place. And so Ayanna Pressley and Representative Justin Amash, you know, here they are, you know, two different sides of the aisle. Yes. They're working together, you know, to try to make it a better place for everyone across the nation. I don't think people realize, you know, when you do police reform, it's not just to help these inner cities that, you know, have these urban struggles. You know, right. This goes for everyone. You know, people don't really highlight it or talk about it, but there are a lot of people of different races, you know, different incomes, you know, that deal with police in a way that they feel they weren't justified. And so I think people need to understand that, yeah, we might highlight certain stories or situations, but the way that some of the police departments train their, you know, I guess you call them cadets at that time, sometimes it is excessive force. Now, I will say, in 1994, there was a crime bill that was signed, and it was actually penned by VP Joe Biden, who's now running for president. But one of the co-sponsors was actually my opponent, Kwesi Mfume. And I tell people in Baltimore, this is important to know because they then made it so that the usage of crack cocaine was a crime. So, you know, now we talk a lot about addiction and, you know, the war on drugs. But imagine, you know, being addicted and however you got there, you were then locked up for it. So, you know, when we see aggressive policing, we have to understand that aggressive policing policy was put in place in the 90s, you know, by many of the people that we see still in office today. So, you know, I just try to educate people and tell them, like, you know, this is how we got here. How you see it, that we need to change it, that's totally up to you. But I just want to make sure you're informed on how we got here and how I believe we can make a difference and change it.
Right. And even if the, you know, the people who kind of penned those bills would say, all right, the intention was this, the result was that. So perhaps we need to change it again. And again, that's what I really love, that your holistic approach to politics is not, and we've talked a little bit before, you know, about, I always say, I just vote for who's smarter, right, at the time. And so you're like, this person's Republican, that person's a Democrat, but it's the issue that we need to work on and the result of the issue. And so maybe we try something and that didn't work. And so now we need to say, instead of saying, well, I put that policy in place, it has to stay forever, then we say, okay, that policy didn't work out the way that we hoped it did. Actually, it led to more crime. Our jail's full. We're the most incarcerated country in the entire world. Maybe that didn't work out the way we had hoped. So let's visit the issue again, admit, okay, that didn't turn out the way we had hoped, and come at it in a different angle. And so as far as we talked a little bit earlier too, another thing that is pros is the squad part is the Green Deal. And you had talked about Republican Party definitely needs to get on board as far as we need to take care of our planet. But as far as not supporting the Green Deal, I know that you were saying, well, you want something that actually works, though, right? That's proven. So tell us about the ports and some of the ideas that could really help preserve Baltimore, first of all, and the world at large, that are actually proven to work, and not just throwing money at something that, you know, may or may not pan out.
Yeah, so the Green New Deal, I mean, I know it sounds great, you know, but it's going to cost us trillions of dollars. And unfortunately, like we talked about earlier, I'm all about results. I'm results driven. And so, you know, you look at that deal and it says, okay, if we do this, you know, it might end up, you know, so that things are better here. We're just not sure. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to spend that kind of money. Yeah. Let's be sure. You know, in Connecticut, they have right now a company that's up there doing wind energy and, you know, bringing in more natural sources, making Connecticut one of the top, I believe, in the entire country. They're now #1 in trying to push green new ways to, you know, to basically operate their city. And I think in Baltimore City, we have the second largest port in the country. I think we could do the same. We could utilize it the same way and do something with wind energy. And on top of it, it would create more careers and jobs. I would love to see, you know, apprenticeships or, you know, something that we could pipeline through the high schools where we have these kids, you know, go through these programs and end up working right there in their backyard. You know, it's just, to me, it just makes too much sense, you know, and it's like, for me, Republicans and Democrats, we've got some people in office that, you know, they should have retired a long time ago. And I think when they hear, when they hear like, oh yeah, when they hear about climate change or they hear about, you know, taking care of the environment, they're kind of like, oh, no way, you know, because they've been there at a time where no one talked about that. But that is something that we have to look at. You know, like you said, we put policies and things in place with great intentions. You know, I talk about all the time as Republicans, we were the ones that did No Child Left Behind. Unfortunately, that was one of the worst policies I think our country has ever made in history, because we literally pushed kids through school without actually educating them.
Right.
So it's like, you know, the intentions there are great, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so at some point, here we are in 2020, we have to start taking care of the environment. We have to actually, you know, science is a thing, you know, whether we want to admit it or not. You know, It's like, you know, science is a thing, and we got to get on board and understand that we've got to make some changes. And I think, you know, when I was out on the campaign trail during my special election, I met a young man and his dad that came up to me and said, hey, I don't really want to vote for a Republican, but I don't want to because you guys just don't seem to care about the environment. And we sat down and we talked about it for an hour. And I was like, look, whatever ideas you have, whatever you want to bring to the table, I say bring it to the table. I said, you know, I don't think Republicans are that stubborn. I think they just don't realize that these changes need to happen, and this is why. I don't think we ever really sit down and talk about it. You know, they're kind of like, you know, yeah, that's cute. You know, AOC talks about climate change. You know, that kid Gretchen, she talks about climate change. So they kind of like just, you know, block it out and act like it's not happening. But you know, it is happening, and we do have to make some adjustments. And, you know, Republicans are so on board with cleaning the environment in Baltimore City, right? They love the cleanups. They love, you know, taking care of the illegal dumping. Well, it's all connected. You know, we've got to have a decent quality of life.
Absolutely. And I think just from my little bit of research, you know, the Republican Party is often, you know, very fiscally responsible, which I love. And so, yeah, they don't want to dump money into something that, you know, some people are saying it's faulty science. Some people, you know, just say, well, this is going to cost American jobs. But I really do think, even if I remember my grandfather, God rest his soul, you know, he would tell me, and I agree with him, this might be true, that we've seen periods of global warming in our Earth crust, much warmer than it is today. However, he did agree that we're still making our Earth a global trash can. We're killing the fish in the sea. We are, you know, smogging up our air to where we can't breathe. These things need to be, whether it makes the Earth warm or not, we need to take care of the planet and not make it a global trash can full of smoke, right? And so I totally am on board with like, let's be fiscally responsible about this. Let's make sure Americans have jobs. But I do think if we don't catch up with what the rest of the world are putting into initiatives, that we'll be behind the ball because everybody else will have, you know, put in this new sustainable technology that's actually creating jobs. And I think we do need to catch up with that. And I think we will. I think they're not so stubborn.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so.
So again, this is, you know, CTM, Christian Times Magazine, and you told me a little bit about the moment you decided to just fully put your trust in the Lord and how that has affected your life and your career. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a very personal story that I didn't share for so long. And this is one of the reasons why I even started my nonprofit. When I was 15 years old, I lost all of my hair to alopecia. And they said it was a hormonal reason, but they couldn't actually pinpoint why or how to get it back or if it would ever come back. And so unfortunately, I remember going to this one doctor. I was about 16 years old. My mom would take me to all these doctors just trying to get different opinions. And the doctor said, you know, when you have a child, it'll actually reverse itself. And I said, well, I'm 16 years old.
Right.
I'm not having any kids. Yeah, it was awful. So, you know, I said, I guess I won't have any hair. I mean, you know, I'm not going to have a child to have hair, but you know, that's kind of how I really started just, you know, my confidence level, my self-esteem. I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to leave high school right then and there. I was in 10th grade when it happened. Sure. And I would cry every single night. My mom was like, I don't even know what to do. You know, my mom had, you know, no experience working with fake hair or anything, you know, and so here I am, this 16-year-old girl going to class with like a wig that you would see some old grandma wearing on Sunday at church. You know, this is before the cool wigs came out, and I would get teased relentlessly. It was horrible. So even my first year of college, I actually got off to college, and you know, I was teased there as well. I went to an HBCU, and there was just a lot of focus within the Black community on hair. You know, it's just something that we do in our culture. And so I would go home on the weekends and I would just tell my parents, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't, you know? So I left school. I sat in my room at home at my parents' house for like years. I was just so depressed and I was so upset. And, you know, I was sitting there one day and I was like, you know, I guess I keep asking this question, you know, why me? You know, it was always like, why me? Lord, why me? Why is this my life? Well, you know, and so one day I was just like, okay, I keep asking the same question. I don't get an answer. So I said, let me just switch this question up a little bit. Why not me? You know, why can't I handle this? Maybe I should be asking myself that question. Why can't I do this? And, you know, when I started asking myself that question and I started saying, you know, dear Jesus, I understand now. You gave this to me obviously for a reason, because of it, I have become a stronger person. Yeah. Because of it, I got out of my parents' room. I went to work. I decided, you know what? I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. I ended up doing some stuff in media. My dream growing up as a kid was to one day be in broadcasting, you know, being a media anchor. And I was like, oh, one day I'm going to be sitting at that desk and I'm going to be giving the nightly news, you know? And so it's like I kept pressing it and pushing forward. And even though I didn't finish college, I didn't get my college education, you know, here I am now on Fox News and One American News and, you know, living my dream, but also helping people at the same time. And, you know, when I started my nonprofit, going around in Baltimore City, I kept meeting women that basically felt the same way I did. You know, they had a traumatic experience or they just felt like, why me? You know, why am I living in this neighborhood? Why did I end up in a family where they couldn't make ends meet? Or, you know, my dad wasn't around or, you know, and they've all had these series of traumas that they talked about. And it was clear that is why they were currently on the path that they were on. You know, I talk all the time about, you know, working with women coming out of incarceration. Every woman that I talked to that came out of incarceration was incarcerated because of either a boyfriend or some guy that they were with, whether he decided to sell drugs or, you know, they decided to rob a bank and, you know, she was a getaway driver. It was always connected to some guy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you sit down and you talk to these women. We would go to lunch, you know, while we would do our makeovers. And they would just talk about how they were just in a place where they just had no self-esteem, no confidence, no self-worth, and they latched on to a guy that showed them any attention. And I say, wow, this is a story that many women deal with. And if I can help in just the least bit, I'm going to do that. And so that's why I kept pushing forward, with my nonprofit. And I felt like I was, another young woman that was in that same position where I didn't want to leave my room because, here I am thinking I, wasn't worth anything even to myself. So as soon as I switched that question around, things started getting better. I started thriving a lot more. I didn't feel like I was, whoa, it was me. For some reason, I just got the energy to say, you know what, why not me? Just go out there and do it. And so that in that moment is when I actually really trusted in the Lord, because for a long time I thought, how could he let this happen to me? I'm supposed to be that nightly news anchor, what's going on? But yeah, I trusted in him and the fact that he put me through that situation to make me stronger in who I am today.
And it allows you to inspire, to both be the person who has made it, who has come up and been the victor over any circumstance, and know that, I can be the victor over this circumstance and the next one and the next one. And you can relate to people who have already become the victors, but you can also empathize and really stand with someone who has not yet turned that question around, someone who, is still in the place where they're in the trial because you've been there. And you're not just someone saying, hey, I'm going to make your life better, but you're saying, you know what, I've been in the place where I had no confidence. I've been in the place where I thought I didn't have opportunities. I've been in the place that you're at now. And this is where I've come here, and I know how to bring you here with me. And because we're all coming here, just like, Christ said to go make disciples of many nations, like I'm bringing all of my disciples to a better place, and so that we can all have a better life, and it's going to make life better for everyone around us. And so, yes, I love that you've used this story of triumph and confidence and becoming a woman who is a victor over every circumstance, whether that is with hair and confidence in our looks, because let's face it, as much as we want to change that, especially as women, our looks tends to be the first thing that people notice, the first thing we're valued or not valued for. And so you're able to change that story around, and then also be the victor in politics. It doesn't matter if, I was actually just reading, I think it was Mark Twain who said that everyone, some people get an education, some people go to college, and everyone gets their education after or something. Actually, I'm gonna look that up. It's very, I just read it this morning, so I'm going to find it for you. It's a Mark Twain quote, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's daily quote. Here we go. Some people get an education without going to college. The rest of us get it after they get out. That was Mark Twain. And it's so true. Our education is truly what we make of it. It is, are we still reading every day? Are we reading books? Are we staying up on the issues? Are we knowing what's really going on? I read a statistic that most people who graduate college, what they learned is obsolete within 5 to 10 years, if not less nowadays, that everything is technologically going so much faster. Business is changing. Social media makes a difference. If you went to business school, 20 years ago, you didn't learn about any social media techniques. And this is something that I think you have really self-educated yourself in a way that helps you to pivot and not hold on to, well, this is what I learned, this is how it has to be. You said, I'm going to go use this platform, and I'm going to go up and force the city to clean up the streets because I'm going to put them out in front of everyone. This isn't something that you could have learned. You had to keep up with the times and what's happening now. And so again, Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for your just beautiful radiance and your presence and your heart for community. I really hope to see you just continue to go on and change Baltimore and change this country for the better in a way that we can see every community really thriving, because we pray for our leaders. And out there in the audience, I encourage you, please pray for Kimberly, pray for our government officials like her, that people like Kimberly can really come into office and change our community and change our world for the better. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you all for watching. As usual, until I see you next time, may the Lord bless and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, and nourish your soul.